Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari Jaya Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Jaya Girivaradhari Jaya Girivaradhari 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 Jaya Yashodanandana Jaya Braja Janaranjana 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 Jaya Yamuna Tiravanachari Jaya Kunja Bihari Jaya Kunja Bihari Jaya Yamuna Tiravanachari Jaya Kunja Bihari Jaya Kunja Bihari Jaya Yamuna Tiravanachari Jaya Kunja Bihari Jaya Kunja Bihari Jaya Yamuna Tiravanachari Jaya Kunja Bihari Jaya Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Kunja Bihari Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Jaya Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Nitai Gaura Haribo, 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 Nitai Gaura Haribo. Shri Shri Radha Madhava ki, Shri Shri Nitai Gaura Hari ki, Shri Prabhupada ki, Shri Shri Nitai Gaura Premanande. Hare Krishna, everyone. Thank you all for joining this morning and for giving us the opportunity to discuss our verse today from Srimad Bhagavatam. We're reading from Canto 4, Chapter 16, Text 4. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Chapter 16. This chapter is the praise of King Prithu by the professional reciters. Text 4. Esha dharma britang shreshto lokang dharme nuvartayan gopta cha dharma setunang shashta tat paripantinam. In the translation, this king Maharaj Prithu is the best amongst those who are following religious principles. As such, he will engage everyone in the pursuit of religious principles and give those principles all protection. He will also be a great chastiser to the irreligious and the atheistic. Okay, so you can repeat after me. Esha dharma britang shreshto lokang dharme nuvartayan gopta cha dharma setunang shasta tat paripantinam. Esha dharma britang shreshto lokang dharme nuvartayan gopta cha dharma setunang shasta tat paripantinam. Esha dharma britang shreshto lokam dharme nuvartayan gopta cha dharma setunang Shashtat tat paripantinam. Does anyone want to read line by line? 4:16:4. Maybe I'll read one more time in between. Esha dharma vritam shreshto lokam dharme nuvartayan gopta cha dharma setunang shasta tat paripantinam. Esha dharma vritam shreshto Esha dharma lokam dharme nuvartayan gopta cha dharma setunang. Thank you, Premi. Anyone else wants to read? Okay, so you want to share? Okay, so we'll read the word for word. Esha, this King Prithu, Dharma Britam, of persons executing religious activities. Shreshtaha, the best. Lokam, the whole world. Dharme, in religious activities. Anuvartayan, engaging them properly. Gopta, the protector. Cha, also. Dharma setunam, the principles of religion. Shasta, the chastiser. Tat paripantinam, of those who are against religious principles. Okay, so you can all repeat the translation. This king, Maharaj Prithu, is the best amongst those who are following religious principles. As such, he will engage everyone in the pursuit of religious principles and give those principles all protection. He will also be a great chastiser to the irreligious and atheistic. So this translation and purport is by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki. Okay, so the purport says, the duty of the king or the head of the government is described very nicely in this verse. It is the duty of the governmental head to see that people strictly follow a religious life. A king should also be strict in chastising the atheists. In other words, an atheistic or godless government should never be supported by a king or governmental chief. That is the test of good government. In the name of secular government, the king or governmental head remains neutral and allows people to engage in all sorts of irreligious activities. In such a state, people cannot be happy despite all economic development. However, in this age of Kali, there are no pious kings. Instead, rogues and thieves are elected to head the government. But how can the people be happy without religion and God consciousness? The rogues exact taxes from the citizens for their own sense enjoyment, and in the future, the people will be so much harassed that according to Srimad Bhagavatam, they will flee from their homes and country and take shelter in the forest. However, in Kali Yuga, democratic government can be captured by Krishna-conscious people. If this can be done, the general populace can be made very happy. Om Gyanatimirandasya Gyanangina Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Svapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupakadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pacharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschati Deshtarine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Vanshakapatirobhyascha Kripasindubhya evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. So, Hare Krishna everyone. I pray for all your blessings to do justice to this class so we can have a better understanding of the Lord's pastimes and His instructions, as well as the pastimes and instructions of His great devotees. So, Srila Prabhupada begins this purport by saying that the duty of the king or the head of the government is described nicely, and it is the duty to see that people strictly follow a religious life. Such people who follow religious principles will be given protection by the king, by the ruler, and those that are irreligious or atheistic, they'll be suitably punished. So we understand just from our experience with the modern world that this isn't the case, because like Prabhupada said, in the name of secularism, the state and the government is kept separate. The state and religion is kept separate. So the problem, Srila Prabhupada says, with this arrangement is that the government head remains neutral and allows people to engage in all kinds of irreligious activities. So if we examine this, and we recall, repeatedly Srila Prabhupada has said that any governmental head is representing the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This is because Krishna himself declares in Bhagavad Gita that he is the Lord of all. Sarva Loka Maheshwaram. As the supreme ruler of all beings, not just this planet, but all planets, Sarva Loka Maheshwaram. It means that every being across the universe is his citizen, actually, and that any ruler is therefore ruling as a representative of him. And Srila Prabhupada explains in the purport of the first canto, 10th chapter, that in that spirit, all of the heads of the other planets as well have been put into their positions as representatives of Krishna. So that means the rulers of the sun planet, the moon planet, Mercury, Venus, all of them. All the planets are actually being ruled by kings or the representative personality who is actually representing Krishna. So on this earth planet as well, initially the rulers were very nicely following the principles of Dharma as set down by Krishna, and so they were worthy representatives of him. But the nature of the material world is that everything deteriorates, and so has the leadership. Deteriorated very rapidly, of course. Also, there's an interesting analogy we can use in that regard when there's a rapid turnover of things. Right? Rulers are changing all the time. Sometimes governments change a few times within a decade. Right? This is not ideal, but we can think of it in terms of cell biology. Right? In cell biology, if you have a cell that's rapidly dividing, it has more of an opportunity to accumulate errors, mutations, right? And then those mutations are carried forward. Right? If you're doing anything very quickly, there's more of a chance you're going to make a mistake. Right? We can think of it that way also. So this is happening all the time when we have governments that are being changed, rulers that are being changed so often. Sometimes you get a mutation. Vienna was a kind of mutation. Right? And the good thing was at that time there were brahmanas who could recognize the problem, right? Because they were spiritually advanced people and they knew the codes of Dharma, and they could fix the situation by killing Vena, and by recognizing Maharaj Prithu as the kind of king that they would want, that would be good for the government, for the citizens. Now obviously in Kali Yuga that's another problem we have. We don't really have qualified brahmanas who can do that. With the result that mostly people are responsible for choosing their own leaders. And Prabhupada said the issue is that people are electing leaders that are a lot like themselves. And Bhagavatam describes what we're like in Kali Yuga. Manda sumanda matayo. Right? We're misguided, we're unlucky, we're quarrelsome, right? We're disturbed. So our leaders are the same like us. In the same way, when Krishna puts the leader in position, the leader has divine qualities like him. Right? Not the same as him, like the leader is God, but qualities of the Lord in minute quantities. And that qualifies them to be a leader. And now we're electing people who are as basically unfortunate and misguided as we are. And it's the same principle when someone autocratically puts themselves, right, in the position of power, dictators and so on. To add to this, if such rulers are ruling in the name of religion, that's how religion gets a bad name. Right? And therefore we have this prevailing idea that if you mix religion and politics, it's bad. Right? It doesn't have a good result. Shri Shri Radha Radhanath ki, Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu ki, Srila Giraj Govardhan Hari ki, Srila Prabhupada ki. So that's why there's an idea that maybe it's better to be secular, right? Because you avoid the problems that also come with religious leaders who aren't living up to the required standard, right? So they're not actually good examples for political leaders anyway. So we could say then that basically all forms of government have pretty much failed. Like we can see, right? The democratic governments, the socialist governments, the communist governments, the religious governments, right? And therefore Srila Prabhupada is saying that even with economic development, even with technological progress, right, nobody is happy. Right? And it's true across the world. Sometimes when you live in a so-called third world country, you think that, over the pond everything is better, but it's not true. Right? Every country is going through challenges right now. And so Srila Prabhupada said, well, he calls them rogues, right? It's a pretty strong word. Right? The leaders are rogues who exact taxes from the citizens for their own enjoyment, right? No one can dispute this. And in the future, people will be so much harassed that they will flee from their homes and take shelter in the forest. So in time, this will happen because, like we said, no approach is really working. Because even when there is a religious government, God is not really at the center of it. The best kind of religion, though, is the one that will be absolute and good for all people at all times. Right? And this is what Maharaj Prithu is said to be. The best among those who are following religious principles. There are many religious principles. But sometimes religious principles are given at a time in history for a specific group of people or for a reason. And then when you try to apply them universally, it doesn't really work that well. Especially if you don't have the right motive and you don't really have God at the center. Right? So let's explain one such situation. We'll look at the rise of impersonalism. Impersonalism was meant for, basically, it was meant to be a counter to Buddhism, right? At least that Buddhism was replacing the Vedic teachings. Even that was something for a time, right? Buddhism was rising because the Lord wanted animal sacrifice in the name of the Vedas to be stopped. So there was a purpose for it, but then when the purpose was fulfilled, then impersonalism came to replace it slowly, and then in time when that when the purpose of impersonalism was fulfilled, then we have the successive acharyas of the Bhakti Sampradayas, right? Ramanujacharya, Sripad Madhvacharya, eventually Lord Chaitanya himself, who would then replace these philosophies that were there for a time with the ultimate, the highest of religious principles, that which Maharaj Prithu is following. And so this is the actual sequence of events. Because the problem with impersonalism is it it isn't all encompassing of all beliefs, right? Particularly of the truth that the Supreme Personality of Godhead has a transcendental form, which is the highest realization of the absolute truth. Impersonalism doesn't accept that, right? Neither does Buddhism. Buddhism actually doesn't have a supreme deity at all. So basically, to have impersonalism or to have Buddhism as a kind of a ruling philosophy or religious principle, it would mean that Bhakti Yoga would be, well, it would cease to exist effectively, or it wouldn't work in the same context. But if we see that, if we look at bhakti, it allows for those who have that attachment to the impersonal to achieve that, right? By Jnana Yoga or by Ashtanga Yoga and focusing on impersonal Brahman, one can actually achieve the impersonal Brahman, right? And of course, if one has this this desire to end one's existence, then this happens through that process. In the same way, Bhakti Yoga also it explains the concepts of heaven and hell as destinations for those of the Abrahamic faith, right? It presents also for these faiths both the impersonal aspect of God, and it also presents the aspects of God as a supreme creator and father, right? Aham sarvasya prabhavo and aham brija pradapita. So we can see that all the beliefs can actually be accommodated under bhakti. Even these are intermediate destinations, they're still possible because of the level of understanding of the practitioner. It doesn't stop there, right? In addition, within the Vedic teachings, there's also the understanding of spirits of nature, right? Ancestors, supernatural beings of all kinds, right? And these beliefs span Native American beliefs, African traditional beliefs, pagan beliefs, right? All of these are actually accepted under the umbrella of the Vedic teachings, right? Also, of course, the multitudes of ruling demigods, right? The administrators of the universe who are handling the affairs for the Supreme Lord. This happens in Norse mythology. Everybody knows Thor now, right? Greek mythology, Roman mythology, Vedic demigods as well, okay, devatas. So basically we find that within this, these religious teachings, a government that's based on the Vedic principles will be tolerant and accepting of all beliefs. Prabhupada actually said this. But he qualified it by saying that ultimately we don't want to settle on the lower principles of trying to use religion to just get a temporary destination or for material gain, dharma, artha, kama, moksha. Eventually we want to get to the highest and ultimate aim of religion, which is love of God. Because this will do the highest good for all people at all times across the spectrum. Okay. And we see that the enlightened persons of many different traditions have been trying to achieve this. Right? When they go beyond those, we could say the regular religious principles that are teaching us at least to get to that level of moral goodness and to get these benefits of economic development and sense gratification and so on. When they go beyond that, they actually try to achieve this. Right? We have the examples in Hinduism of the saints, right? Like Kabir, like Mirabai. We have the Sufi saints, right, in Islam. We have the Gnostics in Christianity. Right? There are many personalities who find that calling within to explore their relationship with God. So this is actually common to all people. And Srimad Bhagavatam calls this the supreme dharma for all humanity. Savai pum samparo dharmo yato bhaktir adokshaje. The highest occupation for all people. Right? And the religion based on this will therefore help all people to achieve this highest occupation, right? By which men can attain to loving devotional service unto the transcendent Lord. So in the course of their searchings, we'll find that all of these mystics, we could refer to them, they also followed some common principles. right, that are universal. They, for example, followed vows of celibacy and chastity. Because if you're chasing after the lust of this world, you can't actually look for the real love of the divine. Some people may think that the fact that following these vows makes it sort of just for a section of society. But the reality is that if society is chasing after literally ordinary physical attraction, which eventually comes to an end, either with death, separation, divorce, any of those, then it doesn't really lead to happiness for anybody either. But in the pursuit of eternal love, there is eternal happiness, and this is therefore universal. So for somebody who follows these principles, it stops us from being distracted basically by what true love is not, and it helps us to focus on what it really is. That's what following this principle does. And of course, in the search for the divine, you want to have steady focus. So therefore, they all abstain from intoxicants of any kind. And in developing that love, they also express love for all beings, and therefore mostly they were also vegetarian, or they didn't consume animal products. To take that point a little further, the responsibility of a king is actually towards the animals as well, Srila Prabhupada says. Because in the Sanskrit terminology, the citizens of a kingdom are known as praja. Now, praja doesn't actually refer to people. It means anyone or anything that is born in the kingdom. And that anyone or anything can basically refer to animals, it can refer to birds, it can refer to plants. Whatever takes birth in the kingdom is a citizen of the king. Right? So the king has a responsibility to the animals as well, the birds and so on. And we can see that that's another point that the leaders pretty much fail miserably on. So basically by now we've established that despite the apparent differences in all religious processes, that a loving relationship with God is the ultimate ideal of all. Right? And the way to achieve that is also common to all. This is what a ruler should be following in order to be the best of all rulers, just like Maharaj Prithu. It's not that this is only possible for the mystics, right, living this kind of life or achieving this kind of goal, because Maharaj Prithu did it. There were many other kings. Actually, Srimad Bhagavatam gives us lots of lists of kings. Sometimes we get a little bit dizzy reading of them. Right? But it's important for us to understand that all these persons, not just one, a different kind of mutation, not just one or two, but many, many, many kings were able to follow these principles, right? To perfect these religious principles and to rule their kingdoms in this condition of love of God. So we may ask then, if we love God, how does it make us love all other beings, right? Love all other persons? How does it make a king actually love all his citizens so that he treats them better than the rogues? Because, like we said, people often think that God divides, he doesn't unite. So the gopis tell us in chapter 29 of Krishna book, they say, our husbands, friends, family members and children are all dear and pleasing to us only because of your presence. For you are the super soul of all living creatures. Right? So basically when we love Krishna, we love everyone because we see him in everyone. Right? That's the basic understanding. The pure devotee is conscious of the Lord everywhere. Right? They're never separate from him, like Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita. And so, having that understanding, they would never think of harming or exploiting any creature. Citizen, family member, it's all the same to them. The problem with us is that we can't do it in reverse. We can't love every creature to begin with and then build up to that love of God, because of the reality that we love everything that's connected to us. So basically, we love ourselves through everything. And with that underlying principle of selfishness, it's not really possible to develop true love for anyone or anything. And Shukadeva Goswami explains this in the 10th canto. It's chapter 14, verses 50 to 52. Srila Shukadeva Goswami said, O king, for every created being, the dearmost thing is certainly his own self. The dearness of everything else, children, wealth, and so on, is due only to the dearness of the self. For this reason, O best of kings, the embodied soul is self-centered. He is more attached to his own body and self than to his so-called possessions like children, wealth, and home. Indeed, for persons who think the body is the self, O best of kings, those things whose importance lies only in their relationship to the body are never as dear as the body itself. So that explains a lot. It explains why there isn't that true love in this world, and why when we feel it is, how quickly it can turn to hate or harm when the object of the affections seems to be a threat to us. Right? Because we're only experiencing actually that love or affection for the other person or other thing as a connection to ourselves. So if it appears to be a threat to ourselves, what do? The love is gone. We become harmful, hurtful, even just neglectful. But that's the end of that, right? That's the end of the love. So what we need to do is the opposite. Right? We transfer the love of ourselves, which is effectively what we have right now. Right? We don't really love anything else. We've established this much. We transfer the love from ourselves to Krishna. That's what the goal of all spiritual traditions actually wants us to do. What's the result then? Shukadeva Goswami says in verse 56 of the same chapter, those in this world who understand Lord Krishna as he is see all things, whether stationary or moving, as manifest forms of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Right? See everything as Krishna, you won't harm or hurt anything. Right? Such enlightened persons recognize no reality apart from the Supreme Lord Krishna. Now we qualify the statement to say that it's not that we see that everyone has become God, right? Everyone has become Krishna. But rather we see that everything being an emanation of Krishna is respected as much as him, loved as much as him, pervaded by him. Right? We can literally see this. Now it's just a theoretical knowledge, but it becomes a realized knowledge through the process of devotional service, right? Where we can actually appreciate this just by looking at people, right? So in that way, we can see how a good leader and a good government can come from that understanding, from that realization. Until then, we're just in our false ego, and that will basically set us up for doing anything to anyone without any kind of consideration or care for that person. It's all about us. So then someone may question, well, Arjuna was a devotee, but didn't he harm others? Right? So this is a very interesting question, because he did fight in the end, but in the beginning he didn't want to, just like any devotee who sees the Lord in everything. He was filled with compassion, Bhagavad Gita says, filled with love for the other party, even though they had treated him and his family so badly. So there's a practical demonstration of what we're saying, how the love for God actually leads you to love everyone or everything else, even if they've harmed you in such heartless ways. Right? The Kauravas had pretty much spent all of Arjuna's life trying to kill him. But he didn't want to kill them in return. He actually wanted, Prabhupada says, to take up the begging profession. Right? This is the kind of devotee he was, rather than fight them. So we could say in that way he was on the level of an Uttamadhikari, right? The topmost devotee who doesn't see the distinction between any living being, right? Everybody is just better than me and should be loved and respected. But Krishna wants him to come down a notch and see that these people are not good. They're not good for you, and they're not good for the world, right? For them to remain as leaders. So it's a little bit like how we're taught that to be a good preacher, you can't see everybody as good and perfect and you remain the humble servant. You have to be humble, but you have to make a distinction, because you have to know who to preach to. Right? If you think everybody is on this exalted level, you're not going to preach to anyone. So even those on the Uttamadhikari level, they come down to the Madhyamadhikari level so that they can be effective preachers. At the Madhyamadhikari level, you make some distinctions, but you make those distinctions perfectly. Right? You know who your superiors are, and you offer them the adequate respect. You know who are on your level, and you make friendship with them. They're your good association, like your superiors. And those who are your juniors in spiritual life, those who don't have any understanding of spiritual life, or they're juniors in the practices, then you show compassion to them and you help them. Right? And then you have the envious. You avoid them. Right? You avoid them. So Krishna was saying, okay, these are the envious. We tried avoiding them, it didn't work. Kill them. Okay, because they're not going to improve. They're not going to improve, and you have a duty. You have a duty as a member of the ruling party to actually do this. Krishna gave them many chances, right? Because he is also the reservoir of all compassion. But they wouldn't be reformed. So Krishna wanted Arjuna to see this. Appreciate that these people are not good and they should be killed. But then we look at this on another level, right? In the 11th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, that Krishna says, actually, you're only an instrument of the killing. They've already been killed by their own evil deeds. That's actually what killed them. Because in his depiction of time, right, which will bring about their destruction, Arjuna sees that they're already dead. So he was just acting as an instrument for the Lord, right? And it's a very exalted position to be on. So we can't take that as our precedent. We can't say that we can do the same, right, for the Lord. We can't, for example, kill somebody in anger, right, over religious principles. And this is because we take our precedent rather from the most recent Krishna of this age, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. We're following his example. Because even he didn't kill, because he, in this age, is delivering rather than killing. So we remember the famous pastime of Jagai and Madai, where Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he called for his weapons and he was ready to kill these two persons. And Lord Nityananda stopped him. In this incarnation, we don't do this. This is for Krishna. This was for the beginning of Kali Yuga and the end of Kali Yuga. At the beginning, it's Krishna, and at the end, it's Kalki. And in between, there's no killing. We're being merciful to everybody. This is what we do. If they're not following the religious principles, right, we're not going to kill them. We're going to be merciful to them. And this is what Lord Chaitanya does. He shows them mercy and they get delivered. So we are following that example. Right? We have to develop the good qualities in ourselves by our personal sadhana. And then we show those or display those good qualities to others. And this is how, Srila Prabhupada says, the democratic government can be captured by Krishna conscious people. And you all were thinking we're gonna stage a revolt, right? It's not like that. We don't capture by force, right? We don't follow the example of Arjuna in that way, right? The same way we don't follow the example of Lord Shiva by drinking poison because people think they can smoke marijuana, or they imitate the Rasa Leela of Krishna but they can't lift Govardhan Hill. So we don't follow Arjuna in his killing pastimes. We follow Arjuna as a compassionate devotee, right? Because this is Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's mood, right? And on his order, the order that's come through Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, Srila Prabhupada, we capture the government by our good examples. The examples that we develop through devotional service, that we can influence others. It's a bit of a cliche, but you have to be the change you want to see in the world. That's literally what we're doing. Therefore, Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, Yad yad acharati shreshtas tatta devataro jana sayat pramanam kurute lokasthana nuvartate. That people will follow the actions of great men and women. The one thing, though, that we have to be careful of is what Prabhupada points out in the purport, is hypocrisy. Because this is a very prevalent trait, this being the age of hypocrisy. Kali Yuga is the age of hypocrisy. So Srila Prabhupada says that leaders who say one thing and do something else, they're responsible for why their citizens or their subjects or their followers can't follow those principles themselves. So we also have to be very careful in our following of the principles. So it's not just the basic principles, but it's also the higher principles, right? The principles of how we relate to each other, the principles of how we relate to those who are innocent. Right? Basically, we have to apply the standard of a Madhyama Adhikari properly. So we're still mostly Kanishta Adhikaris, but we can develop by sadhana, by proper sadhana, those abilities. This is what we hope for. And until we do that, we always say, practice the pause. Before you do anything, think about it. Before you have the absolute intelligence to know what's right and good, just think about what you're saying, about what you're doing. Ask advice, senior devotees, scripture, then act. This will avoid a lot of challenges and difficulties that we have. We can pray to the Supreme Lord within the heart, even if we don't have that superior guidance and direction from without, right? From within, that He gives us that guidance, because that's what He promises us. And when we engage directly and constantly in His service, then He will give us that understanding. Right? In this way, we develop that deliberate spiritual intelligence. Deliberate spiritual intelligence. This is what He tells Arjuna. That spiritual intelligence doesn't mean we become expert at quoting Shastra and, Srila Prabhupada said, and we kind of manipulate situations based on that. That's not the same thing. Right? Deliberate spiritual intelligence is very different. It means that we apply the spiritual knowledge for the good of all, for the good of everyone, not just ourselves. This is what we're hoping for to develop and to help others develop. What we hope leaders will develop so that they can come to this level of Maharaj Pritu. And that's actually what will change the world. Okay. So thank you all so much. Srila Prabhupada ki. Are there any comments or questions or anything I can clarify? Anything you'd like to correct? There's nothing. Thank you all so much. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki. Srila Prabhupada ki.